Welcome back to the Yoga Teacher Collaborative podcast. I am so pleased you're here, and I'm delighted to have our first guest session of the year. If you're new to the Facebook group or you are new to the podcast, my name is Laura Green, and I am a yoga teacher, but also a mentor for yoga teachers on the business side, and also on how to find more ease, joy, skill, spiritual connection in every aspect of your work. And the Yoga Teacher Collaborative podcast is here to support you with all of it, inspiring your teaching, inspiring you in your business, helping things go more streamlined, having that sense of community. And today is a very, very focused session. I have invited my amazing caterer, who I love working with, John from the Hampshire Vegan, to talk to us today because we get a lot of questions in the group about catering when it comes to yoga events. So that might be a morning yoga with brunch. That might be a day retreat with lunch. That might be a weekend retreat with brunch and dinner, or a full breakfast, lunch, dinner service, all the way through to a week retreat, whether it's in the UK or abroad. We all know that the food makes or breaks a retreat. We love to think it's the yoga, but it's the food. I have been running retreats in Spain, Tarifa, for 10 years, and I go there 2 to 3 times a year. Not because it's got my favorite yoga studio, not because of the food, because of the food. It is mind blowing. It makes or breaks a retreat. It brings us all together. It nourishes us. It is just so important. And there's so much that goes into having a smooth working relationship with your caterer that makes their job easier, that makes your job easier, and makes it a better experience for your guests. So I thought I would get an absolute pro on to help us. So John, my love, I'd love you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, how you got into catering yoga retreats, and how you find working with us, because we're a special breed.
Thank you very much for having me on, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm John Pellegrini. I'm from the Hampshire Vegan Catering company. I originally had a small restaurant just outside of the New Forest, and we used to just have people come up to the counter all the time asking if we did any private catering events, functions, parties, anniversaries, that sort of thing. And for a while, we just said, no, that's not what we're doing. And then after a while, it started to become quite clear that there was a gap in the market for that, particularly within the niche of vegan cuisine, which the restaurant was as well. And so at the beginning of 2020, I set up the Hampshire Vegan Catering company. And obviously, that was an interesting year to start on with no live events at all. But after about sort of the spring in 2021, we were completely flooded and inundated with various bits and pieces. And I'm in an incredibly privileged position to be, double booked or having to turn people away most weekends, which is a lovely place to be. And yeah, I got into a lot of yoga catering and retreat catering and wellness and fitness catering, because there's just a lot of crossover with that, and there's a lot of demand for it. And there's a lot of those occasions happening in Hampshire and in the surrounding areas. But I think also when people are looking for things that marry up well with their ethics or belief systems within the practice of yoga, or just to have something that's going to suit everybody at a retreat, is the lowest common denominator. Whether
Mm-hmm.
you're vegan or vegetarian, pescatarian, omnivorous, like everyone can eat the vegan food.
Mm.
And so long as it's tasty, delicious, and nutritious, like nobody cares.
Mm.
So we've been working with a number of different yoga instructors, including yourself, of course. And yeah, probably 20 or 30 weekends a year, we're doing something related to yoga or very similar practices like things like Pilates or meditation retreats and other offerings of a similar nature.
Yeah, and you are right there about it being a very easy cuisine because it sits with the ethics of yoga nicely as well. And actually, it does make things so much easier when it comes to dietary requirements because,
Yeah.
a lot of what you do anyway, because you cook beautiful, healthy food from scratch, is invariably gluten-free as well, other than maybe a
Hmm.
bread on the side. So it kind of or I always know it's going to be gluten-free by default. It's going to help
Yeah,
with vegetarian, vegan. Then it helps with dietary requirements such as um, dairy intolerances. It
exactly.
really makes things very easy on that aspect.
Yeah, it's always interesting when I get the allergen information from yourself or any of the other partners that we work with, and they'll sort of list everything out very diligently, and they'll say, oh, they're allergic to oysters and shellfish, and then this lady's got like an allergy to lactose and so on and so forth. I'm thinking like, yeah, well, that's great, but it's all like there's none of that even in our kitchens at all. So we're all
Yeah.
set, and it's
Yes,
a
so you've
really
got no
simple way of doing it.
cross-contamination then.
Exactly, no risk of cross either. Yeah.
Mm. So let's begin with why book a caterer? And there is definitely some legalities in here, some really important health and safety. But if someone's thinking, oh, I'm a good cook, I want to have this event, I'm just going to cook for it myself, there's some legality reasons why that's questionable. But why should we have a caterer? Why shouldn't I just cook a bean chili in my kitchen and bring it to my event?
Well, like you say, there's obviously some professional risk assessment that needs to happen there, and it's obviously much more professional and safe, and from a legal perspective, to have something prepared in a professional kitchen. But that obvious point aside, I think it really comes down to like managing your own expectations of how you can pull things off and managing your own energy levels. And I think anyone, regardless of the occasion, if they are going to both host and cater at the same time and put both of those roles in the hands of the one or two people that are taking that on, you're going to find yourself completely and utterly drained, which is either going to result in you providing really poor quality food or a really poor quality experience for your yogis, or both. And that's just really not something that you would want. And I think you would be much better to sort of hand things over to somebody who is separate from you, not just that they're capable or that they're an expert, but they're just a separate person who that's their one responsibility is the food, and your one responsibility is to hold space
Yeah.
and bring a beautiful yoga session to the retreat.
Yeah, I completely agree. The effort that goes into teaching on an event, and often just practically, our yoga classes will run straight to dinner time. I find
Exactly.
actually a schedule that sits the yoga well. You'll be yoga in the morning, then breakfast. There isn't the time to also be preparing food. And
No.
then the few days before you're preparing for the retreat, you want to be cultivating the energy of the retreat, working on your lesson plans, dressing your room, not dashing
Yeah.
around the supermarket. And
Exactly.
and then yes, you have to have a health and hygiene certificate. You have to go through courses. And by the time you've done all of that, you haven't saved yourself any money anyway. So I
No.
would always advocate for using a caterer. But I think a lot of people worry that it's going to be unaffordable.
Mm.
And that's why I want to come into like the different types of service that you can book with a caterer and how they come at different budgets. But I'm
Yeah.
often actually surprised how cost effective it is using a caterer than as a layperson going to the supermarket, not really knowing what you're doing, buying the expensive things, not being able to buy in bulk, taking us so much longer to cook than it does you. Um, do you think that actually having a caterer isn't a luxury option, that it can be the sensible pricing option as well?
Yeah, I think it can be both. I think it can be both the affordable and reasonable way to go about it,
Mm,
especially when you think about the non-financial aspect of it, the sort of drain that it might put on you on an emotional or physical level to get the work done. In addition to the cost of the ingredients and the time that it would take you to put the meals together. But I think you would also find that um, you know there are occasions when you would want luxury as well. You
yes.
would want a really luxurious experience for your retreat guests. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, a retreat is not dissimilar to a holiday. It really should be relaxing and unwinding. And if your price per meal ends up being the equivalent or even slightly less than you would be paying for like a meal out in a restaurant when you're on holiday in Spain or something like that,
Mm,
you know, what's the difference?
mm,
And like you say, obviously when you book somebody who's a professional caterer, they have access to wholesale high quality ingredients, they have access to cooking skills that make things more time efficient for them, all the various bits of equipment, And that allows us to get, a bulk of everything done faster. For me, a lot of the time, it doesn't really matter whether I'm cooking for 8 people or 40. It's going to be broadly the same amount of time that's involved because it's just about doubling or tripling or 10xing the ingredient quantities.
Whereas the amount of extra chopping time for that would have just taken me all day.
Maybe,
So
yeah.
we know that it really is the right thing to work with a professional when there is food involved in your event.
Mhm.
It's the right thing, it's the responsible thing, and it supports you delivering the best event possible. If someone was, running their first retreats, really dipping their toe in and wanting to keep their retreat affordable and their upfront costs affordable so that there's less risk until they know whether actually, yeah, my audience really likes this. We're going to do it again. I can increase the price. What are the different types of service that come at different budgets from let's first talk about the food and then we can talk about the service that you're given. But I know
Yeah.
you can just order a bowl of food to be dropped off. What are your different options on just the food to begin with, different budgets?
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally pretty happy to work with anybody towards what budget they have, and it is important to develop that trust beforehand, where you can know that you're getting what you want out of it, and
And be
uh,
confident to say that, actually, to be confident
yeah,
to say, I'm only just starting. This is the budget I have. Is there anything we can do together with that?
yeah,
That takes a lot of confidence for someone to
it
do that.
does. It does, but it's still the better choice than sort of
Mm.
backpedaling later on and saying, "Oh no, sorry, I thought that's just too expensive," and then it becomes this kind of weird negotiation instead of just an upfront saying like, "Look, it's my first time doing this. I've only charged people whatever £50 per person for this event, and this is all I've got left after booking the hall and this and that, and I still
Mm.
want to make something. So this is the budget available to me. How can we work with that?" And we could say, "Okay, that's going to have to look a little bit more like this, but next time we might be able to do something like this." And having that
Mm.
conversation up front is really useful. So
That's
something that
such an
I
important nugget. Honestly, I don't think many people would approach the conversation with a caterer like that. And I really wish we were able to be so much more honest and upfront without a feeling of shame or embarrassment. Just say, look, this is my first one, this is the budget, this is what I've got. Is there anything we can do? So if I came to you with something like that, what is my entry level options?
yeah, so some of the lowest end options in terms of pricing, but not quality. The quality is always
Yeah.
consistently the same, regardless. That's something that we certainly strive for at Hampshire Vegan Catering. But yeah, it would just be a delivery of something. It would involve essentially no staffing, and you wouldn't have anybody on site to sort of help you out. And that might look like a pre-prepared bento box in a compostable packaging, or like a kind of quinoa grain nut salad, something like that, with sort of various sides, or like a breakfast burrito, or something simple that's already made up. It's exactly the same for everybody. There aren't really sort of any hot elements. It's all served as like an ambient packaged salad. A sort of like really bougie meal deal would be the way of thinking about it. And maybe that's coming in at more like £10 per person or something.
And what I love about that is that yes, I might need that kind of prepared bento box bougie meal deal option, as you said, like the packaging of it being sustainable and biodegradable. But I might
Mm.
need that not just because of budget reasons. I might
Yeah,
need that because I'm somewhere that hasn't got anywhere to sit down to eat, or somewhere that's not
absolutely.
like that. There just isn't the option to sit down for a meal.
Yeah.
That could be a really fun, maybe it's a like summer outdoor yoga brunch picnic type thing. That could just be
Yeah.
something really fun to do.
Yeah, we've had that. We've had people book us for outdoor occasions where there is no facilities to do anything more significant than that. So that becomes a very practical option. Recently, we had a hire in Chichester for I think it was a sort of yoga, but a mixed thing. They also did like flower arranging in the middle of the day and some other bits and pieces. A small sort of day retreat, and they had to change venue at the last minute because there was some sort of fault with the existing venue, and then that meant they suddenly didn't have a kitchen, and so we switched it up and we did like a sort of we were going to do a warm Mexican fiesta with a bean chili and all these other lovely elements, and we ended up sort of packaging as much as we could that into, like you said, like a pre-packaged meal. And that brought the cost down, which was helpful for them as well. But it also made sure that we could deliver that in an environment where we didn't have access to a kitchen. So it was a perfect solution.
And then so the next option up from that.
Probably above that, you've got either the self-serve buffet where you just sort of lay everything out and people people would serve themselves exactly how much they want, and that would be on a very similar sort of price point to something that's table sharing. And both of those options are somewhat interchangeable in the sense that it really just comes down to how many people you've got there. You know, if you're only dealing with 8 to 10 people, it's going to make sense to have a sort of table sharing situation where
Mm.
it's a bit more like tapas or pass and play, where everything's on the table in front of them. Whereas if you've got 40 people or something, obviously you're not going to do table sharing because it's going to be a bit chaotic to pass that around. But you might do something like, okay, there's 2 trestle tables set up in the corner of your venue, your village hall, wherever you might be, and then people are serving themselves. And that
Yeah.
still might mean that somebody like myself or from another team would still be there to sort of manage the buffet, but they're not sort of ferrying plates back and forth between tables. They're just there to sort of, top up the salads when they dwindle or, get everything set up in advance in terms of maybe laying the table and setting out everything on the buffet spread. Yeah.
That it like I've been running retreats abroad for 10 years, day retreats starting in the UK for maybe 12 or something. And it makes me realize how much experience you learn over time that I don't think to notice. But yeah, decisions, I've always made a strong decision about how service is going to happen,
Yeah.
and how that relates to the number of people, whether it is on the table sharing, whether it's a help yourself buffet, whether it's the chef is standing there and plating as you go, or
Yeah.
whether it's completely pre-plated and delivered to the table. And
Hmm.
yes, they all have a different energy, but actually sometimes my thought process on that is it hot food? How quickly do I need to get it out? And how many people could be standing in a queue
Yeah.
waiting to get their food? Like
Yeah,
instantly, then
absolutely.
you said if it was a buffet for 40 people, you've got 2 trestle tables. So again, that's your
Yeah. Yeah.
experience there, knowing you don't want a queue of 40 people
No, you
waiting
can have a
for
double
buffet.
double
So have
funnel
you,
system.
yeah, which
Yeah.
again is just experience that you and I both have that we wouldn't necessarily have had the first time we did something like this. So what are your thoughts on the most efficient way to get people eating and enjoying their food without having to stand in a queue?
Well, it's probably something I've learned myself, a mix from weddings, but also from working with you at Random's House,
Mm,
because that's an environment where there's no kitchen facilities for starters, and we have to sort of be quite creative with the menu choices. But it's also a situation where I know you pack a lot into the day, which is really good, and it's
mm,
great value for everybody that's on the retreat. But you're on quite a tight schedule, so it's often sort
mm,
of like, well, we'll be finishing up, and I can usually hear the from the other room when you guys finish the session, and I know that you've got like just like 30 or 35 or 45 minutes to sort of get that break in the middle of the day before you
mm,
then return to other practices. So when I know in that situation that we're kind of on that tight time schedule, it just made sense to like right before everybody's available to plate that up and just have it where there's an identical plate for everybody, maybe with an option of a bread or a chutney or something like that, and everybody can just come in and take it away. And that's usually a crowd of 25 to 30 people, but they get
mm,
served as quick as they can walk in the door and pick
mm,
up a plate and walk out of the door. They don't have to do any, oh, which of these 2 choices do I want, or how do I ladle this onto a plate and
mm.
balance it with this, and where's the cutlery? It's all just right in front of
Yeah.
them and it's ready to go.
And that's again a real thing about communication with your caterer, like your caterer knowing, oh no, I give a really luxurious 90-minute break, or no,
Yeah.
like, no, I'm a nightmare. You're lucky if you get 10 minutes and a chance to pee. Uh, um, and again, that is just that level of communication.
Yeah.
So from your kind of bento box, luxury kind of picnic vibe, which could be really fun, really summer
Yeah.
worthy, really good outside, really good if you're like struggling for facilities, and really good
Yeah.
if you're kind of entry level on your budget. To then maybe a more buffet, maybe you've got one person there overseeing the buffet. And then what was like, so for instance, when I finished my teacher training, when it used to be residential, I always wanted them to have like a showstopper because we'd finish with a 1 week residential, and it would just be normal catering throughout the residential, just here's food, come in, eat it, get back to class. And then I always
Yeah.
wanted like a real showstopper of a celebration dinner at the end. What is that like? No, come on. Let's pull out all the stops. Let's do a showstopper. What would be, I've never come to you with that. What would be my options there?
Well, you'd have a proper plated meal. I mean, it wouldn't be like a silver service as such, where you've got like as many waiters as you have people at the event and they're passing everything over your shoulder and being like overtly posh and polite. But it would be quite close to that in the sense of the presentation of the food would be really elegantly plated. You'd have like a real thought put into that, not just a practicality of let's get the food on the plate so that everybody can take it away and eat it. It would be also a visual stimulation before you're
Yeah.
eating it, and it would be whether that's like a 2 or 3 course meal, but it would be that everything's all sort of like thematic and paired up and well thought about, and also considering any additional allergen and intolerance is for the occasion, making sure that those people aren't left out and they're not just sort of missing bits from the meal and that sort of thing. So just a real care for detail
Yeah.
and making
That was
sure
an
that everybody's got a
absolute
beautiful meal.
disaster. I had once. I've been trying to think about the few occasions that I have made an error with catering. And yeah, I did only have one potential disaster. And I was working with a vineyard, and they said they wanted to do like a lunch pairing tasting at the
Yeah,
end. And I said, I will have vegan, gluten-free people. Can you accommodate that? And they said,
yeah,
yes. And the day before, I just got this insanely overwhelming feeling it wasn't going to be okay.
right.
And I do trust that. And I went to the supermarket and I bought gluten-free breads, vegan cheeses,
Hmm.
a vegetarian quiche. I can't remember what it was, but I actually went and bought a lot. And I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this because I paid for this, but I just had
Yeah,
this feeling. And when I got there, yeah, they did like a charcuterie, breads, cheeses, tasting with wine. And at the end of the day, for
yeah,
my gluten-free people, they just removed the bread. For my
right.
vegetarian people, they removed the charcuterie. And then for my
Yeah.
vegan people, they removed the charcuterie and the cheese. And then I had a vegan gluten-free person. So they
Yeah.
removed the cheese. There was nothing.
Yeah, so she just had wine and olives. Like,
Yeah, yeah. But
that's not how you do
luckily,
it. You got to
I had
substitute.
just had this heebie-jeebies. And I asked them when I got there, and I just dealt with it. I just took over the kitchen and just dealt with it. But
Hmm.
yes, looking after those people without just removing things from their plate.
Yeah, because they've all paid the same price as well, so they all deserve the same amount of food, the same meal, But this is something like you've said, you had that instinct, and thank goodness that you had. But also, you shouldn't be in a place where you're having to feel like that. You should have that implicit trust with your caterer, so that you know that they're going to take care of everybody, and that everybody's going to be in safe hands, and that as best possible, everything is going to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the three different kind of tiers of food
Yeah,
that all
broadly speaking,
come with
yeah.
a different price packet. Kind of three things you could expect to ask someone. What could you do
Mm,
with a drop-off bowl based service? What could you do for the buffet service? What could you
yeah.
do for a plated service?
Hmm.
But then within that, there's then a separate conversation about responsibilities and the level of service. And again,
Yeah,
understanding that these come with a different price point. So, really
sure.
thinking as the facilitator, what is your energy? What is your capacity? Is it
Hmm.
helpful to have drop off? So, what are the different kind of service level options that someone would think to consider?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time they'll marry up with those options with the meals. Obviously there is no service provided with delivery other than the delivery service. And that might just look like, if you're within a 20-kilometer radius, it's free. If it's a 40-kilometer radius, it's
Yeah.
this much for the transportation of it. But there isn't going to be any expectation with a delivery service that you're going to be there to answer questions about the food or you're going to hand it out to anybody or anything like that.
Or deal
And
with the waste at the end of the day, like who's
ex-
taking all the bento box? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's just delivery in the same way that if you ordered something online and you got it delivered to your house, that's the same thing, delivery. And then, yeah, there would be other things where you could say, oh, yeah, I'm going to stand here and manage the buffet, or I'm going to put everything out on the table, and then I'm around to help to do this, that, and the other. And you can, like you said before, I think this is another instance where you have to have that open and honest discussion ahead of time of what the expectations are, because if you assume like you're probably both going to be assuming that each other are going to do it, and then nobody's got the responsibility for it, and you don't want that tension on the day of, oh, I've got to just quickly ask, does he expect me to do this, or do
Yeah.
I need to say you're supposed to be doing this, right? And it's unclear.
Yeah.
And I'm often quite people pleasy and easygoing and laid back and relaxed, and that lends itself to like a smooth experience more often than not. But sometimes it lends itself to me sticking around for a couple of hours when I haven't necessarily agreed to do that, and then there's a conversation after the fact to say,
Yeah.
like I didn't mind clearing up that time, but if you want that another time, it's this little service
Because
charge on
that's
top.
2 hours of your, it's 2 hours more of your time that you could have been at home with your wife and
Yeah.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah, or getting on to the next project, or just traveling back quicker, or whatever it might be. It's
Mm.
it's less about what happens next and more about what was the expectation beforehand. But also, you
Yeah.
manage those expectations, then you both have a really smooth experience because, I've also had it the other way where people were like, "Oh, and I stepped into the kitchen after the event concluded, and he'd already cleaned everything up." They hadn't
Yeah.
expected me to do that, but that was the package that they had picked up. And they were
Yeah.
delighted with that because they were exhausted at the end of the day for holding space for everybody for 6 hours or something, that they didn't have to do any of that. And then for them, that was the cherry on the top, but that was something that I had already sort of agreed to do. And then they get to know that, okay, that's why this is worth more than me trying to hustle and
Yeah.
prepare it myself, or this is why
Yeah.
this is worth more than if I ordered something in from M&S or wherever else.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
that's the added value with various different packages that you're providing with people, because they are not having to do that additional work, and it's not just
Yeah.
the preparation of the food, like you say, it's the rubbish, or it's the washing of
Yeah.
dishes, or the clearing away and providing the
I
equipment if need
appreciate
be.
that so much. Like, especially, there's two different day retreat venues I work at, and one of them, it has no crockery, as you know. So
Yeah,
you bring the crockery, you bring the plates, you bring everything, and you take it all back home. And then
yeah,
there's another venue I use that has a proper professional kitchen off the back. So it has all its own lovely china crockery. And then invariably, when I've not worked with you there on a day retreat, and I've worked with other people, I've used a drop off. No, I've used a buffet service. So they stay for the
yeah,
buffet, but then they go once everyone's got their food and sat down. And that was the agreement. And I'm like, oh, that's
yeah,
fine. There's a proper professional kitchen. I'll stack it up. I'll wash it up at the end of the day. And when I
yeah,
say that, it sounds like nothing. And then come five
yeah,
o'clock, I am in the kitchen washing 20 plates, 20
yeah, and
bowls,
you're exhausted.
20 mugs, 20 glasses. And
Yeah,
in that moment, the price difference between that and then a service where I said to someone, no, please stay for the whole food time, serve, be there during the food and clear up afterwards. It's so worth paying that little bit extra.
yeah, I think it's a useful thing to think about in lots of different areas of life, but asking yourself the question, how much would I pay myself to do this job, is a very
Mm,
useful way of getting into the headspace of like where the value is in paying for somebody else to do it, or another
mm,
service. And
mm.
people are used to that perhaps with something like a cleaning service or washing their car, or something outside of the workspace that they're in. And you might want to try and bolster your profit margins by trying to do more yourself. But then if you're sort of saying like, okay, cool, I can make an extra whatever, 10, 20 pounds per hour to do this, would I pay myself 15 pounds an hour to wash dishes for 60 minutes? It's
Mm,
like,
mm,
I don't know if I would. Like, I would much rather have that time to unwind after teaching,
mm.
or to travel home an hour earlier, or whatever else it might be. So
Yeah.
the value there is in asking that question to yourself, like, would I pay myself X to do this myself? And if the answer is not really, then it's probably worth paying that to somebody else to do it. So
And then I guess it's just the clarity of the conversation. Again, is this just a
yeah,
drop off the food? I
mm,
know a lot of people do, even if it's not like a cold bento box for a residential retreat, they'll drop off the chili, but you're
yeah,
heating it, you're warming it, and
sure,
actually
yeah,
really considering how long will take and planning your
yeah,
schedule around that it's going to
hmm
take you half an hour to warm that through well,
yeah,
and then to serve
and
it.
yeah, and as you've said before, often your yoga practices will lead right up to dinner. You might have got dinner scheduled for 7 o'clock at night, and you're doing something until half six or
Yeah.
quarter to seven. There's just no chance to, okay,
No,
everybody lie down and do yoga nidra on your own. I've just got to go and put the chili
just
on.
going
Is
to warm
is
your
not the
chili.
vibe you want.
No.
Whereas being able to continue to be in that room and answer some questions after the practice, which of course there always are, and then be
Mm.
able to get, just to step in and I say, everything's going to be on the table in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Sit down,
I
grab a
do
drink.
really appreciate that. You're so right, because after the class is finished, I'm always there just answering a question,
Yeah,
having a one-to-one. And you know
yeah,
that actually when I work with you, you're not just a chef, you are also a space holder. So when
Yeah.
they walk into the kitchen, you're like, hi, welcome to dinner. And it doesn't
Exactly.
matter that I'm
Yeah.
not in the room. So then we've
Yeah.
got bento box only, obviously, it's just dropped off,
Yeah.
or drop off and you need to reheat it. Again, just know you've agreed that. And are you heating it? Is an assistant heating it? How are you serving it? You have that
Yeah.
decision. Are you plating? Are you buffeting? What's the right approach to the number of people you're trying to feed?
Hmm.
To then a chef that comes in and plates, but they're not setting the table. And then after they've plated, they're going because it's a lot of time to wait whilst everybody eats. Or are they
Yeah.
doing that? No, I set the table, I wash up, I plate, I serve, I clear up at the end, I do all the washing up. I will come
Yeah.
into an empty kitchen and I will leave and it'll be an empty, perfect kitchen. And that's the highest end of the service, would you say?
Yeah, I would, sure. And again, sort of depending a little on what meal choices are going to go for. Obviously it's a difference in the number of people that are there and how it's plated and stuff. But yeah, that as a service, as to what you're providing in addition to the food would be the higher end of things. And I think as an example, that's the sort of thing that really suits a residential retreat where
Yeah.
people are, that's a premium experience for a lot of people. They will probably attend, I would say, 2 to 3 retreats of that nature in a given year. It's very much like a holiday for them, that you don't want to be in a situation where anyone, the host or otherwise, especially because they're residing often in the places where the kitchen or the equipment
Yes.
is, to be expected to do anything, in terms of, they might make themselves their tea in the middle of the week or whatever weekend. Um, but you wouldn't want to sort of like step out of that room and be like, all right, when you're all finished with desserts, just pop everything in the dishwasher. And by the way, the tablets are under the sink is just like, it sounds fairly harmless, but it's just adding a little bit of, oh, and it's like home from home. I've got to also load the
Yeah.
dishwasher here. It's like,
Yeah.
maybe people are paying quite a bit for the weekend and they really want to relax. And again, it's not just about the financial transaction, it's that emotional and sort of energy transaction that they're going to sort of feel, fed, and that, they're going to do the yoga, they're going to feel fed, and then they want to get rested and recovered and, retreat
Yeah.
into a quiet part of the evening. They don't want to sort of be rinsing out glasses and stuff. So more often
Yeah.
than not as a sales pitch to sort of increase what I'm making, but to offer that service at retreats, especially the residential 3 day, 4 day retreats, to be able to come in and say, look, I'm going to arrive an hour before. I'm going to be setting the table. I'm going to be putting napkins down, water out, wine glasses, and everything on the table. And then I'm going to be providing the food, clearing it away, serving dessert, clearing it away, and making sure that the kitchen is exactly how I found it when I
Mm.
arrived, is for
Mm.
me the standard that I would offer for a residential retreat, because that suits the nature of it more often than not. And it's just the better fit. You don't want
Yeah.
to expand what you're having to do as a host by clearing, or, people say, no, no, it's fine. I don't mind doing it. But ultimately, they will mind doing it when things come down to the line.
Honestly, I couldn't agree more. And I couldn't agree more on the impact of guests not having to clear. It
Mm,
sounds frivolous to begin with, but it really isn't. And it's something I'm really strict on all of my retreats. And I say it at the beginning. Um,
yeah,
I like to spoil you. Let
yeah,
me spoil you. We don't want you cleaning your glasses, putting the dishwasher on, helping out. And not being sexist, but most of my retreat guests are women, and then most of
hmm,
them take a lot of that load at home,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
struggle. They struggle to begin with. They'll stack their plates,
yeah,
like and by the end, to see how much their nervous system has unwound from, oh, I've got to do that, I've got to be helpful, I've got to tidy that away.
yeah,
I think it's actually quite a profound opportunity for their nervous system to fully rest from being like ready to jump up to help.
absolutely.
Some people find it really, really hard. Um, and then I
To
think
relax.
having a caterer where your guests can see that no, someone's being paid for that job, it is
Hmm.
their job to do that, helps
Yeah,
them relax a little bit more. Because for a long
absolutely.
time, my mum and I have worked together. Um,
Hmm.
and so I'll do all the clearing. And I know this, I can see my guests are slightly more on edge because they've seen I've worked all day. They'll know, like, she's worked like 17 hours today. So I can see they're
Yeah,
slightly on edge. But when they know, no, no, someone else has been completely and fully paid for that, that's their job. I feel good about it. I think it's
Yeah.
really important. Okay, so we've done different
Yeah.
types of service, absolute clarity around who setting table, clearing up. It's not just have the conversation, so you know, and then you're aware of the price accordingly. Then another place I see people not communicate clearly enough in advance with their caterer is the other edible produce. So say
Yeah.
you
Yeah. Sure.
have
The
um,
staples.
yeah, you've agreed that you're doing brunch, afternoon tea, and dinner, or you've agreed you're doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah.
But then we know people like a fruit bowl to graze on, or they might like
Hmm.
herbal tea, or they might like um, a biscuit later in the afternoon or something.
Hmm.
Sometimes I think people unexpectedly put that on the caterer because the caterer is dealing with food, so they
Yeah.
don't take a moment to think, is there any other food required outside of breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Like, am I bringing the herbal tea? My retreats, they go through so much tea. The herbal tea. Am I bringing the milk, the non-dairy milk? All the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
milk options? Am I bringing the fruit bowl? Am I bringing a thing of snacks?
Hmm.
What are your thoughts around that?
So, I mean, again, a lot of this will depend on what kind of day or moment it is. If it's just an evening thing, it's going to require less. If it's just a
Mm,
lunch, it's going to require less, and so forth. And obviously, if it's something in the park, it's going to require just what you've ordered for delivery and so forth. But under the assumption that it's an all day thing or it's a weekender or like some sort of sabbatical 3 or 4 days, you are going to need things for in between the meals, absolutely snacks, and also that freedom for people to have things without the pressure of sticking to a schedule. They want that flexibility. Lots of people have different preferences on when they eat and how they eat, whether they eat smaller portions more frequently or whether they do something like intermittent fasting. They might not eat for a while in the morning and then start later. They don't want to feel the pressure of, I've got to join in with breakfast because there's no other opportunity to eat until later in the day. So there's lots of benefits of having things in between. And again, we'll find ourselves circling back to the same idea that this is just an open and honest conversation that you have with your caterer between those of you who are organizing events. And I think what's also very useful, and I often suggest when I'm emailing people back and forth, is do you have an itinerary yet? Can I look at your itinerary? Because there's probably things that, especially if it's the first time you're running something,
mm,
you won't have thought of. But I will have lots of experience as a caterer to offer on that insight. So I can say, hey, look, I know you've booked me for an evening meal on Friday at 7 o'clock, but you've all got guests arriving at between 2:30 and
yeah.
3:30. Would you like anything for arrivals? And they'll say, I didn't even think of that. And I say, look,
Yeah.
there's tea and coffee facilities on site, for example. I know that they're there. I know where everything is, and I know that they'll set that up for you as part of hiring the venue. But I can drop by some, I don't know, raw energy bites or some small cakes or savory options, whatever you might like, for people to pick out upon arrival and to know that that'll bridge the gap between arriving at 3 p.m. and having dinner 4 hours later at 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. And it's just, guess, having that conversation and being, as I said, really honest with your caterer. This is the
Yeah,
first time I've run this because, yeah, you've been to many a yoga retreat. Whereas
yeah,
I know, yes, yoga retreats begin with cake, mind you.
yeah,
A
yeah. Some
weekend
sort of
yoga retreat begins with cake. And it
yeah,
is that come on in, have a cup of tea, sit down, have a piece of cake. I just watch
yeah.
people's nervous systems drop straight away, like, oh,
Oh, absolutely.
landed, versus they left home, they've driven a long way, dinner's not till later. Yeah.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, being
and
really
the,
mindful of potentially how far your guests have commuted as well is an important factor. Like, if they're all staying in the local area, it's where you have your regular practice and it's something that happens every week. Yeah, maybe just a snack after is all you need. But if you've got people driving from London down to somewhere in Hampshire for like a weekend retreat or something, then you need to consider that maybe they haven't eaten anything for the last couple of hours because they've been driving and when is dinner and so forth. Yeah. So
and on the reverse, I remember I
yeah,
did that with you when
before
I
they're
said,
leaving. Mm,
I'm serving them breakfast when they're leaving. I think I
yeah,
actually might have done a brunch. I'm doing a brunch, then we're
yeah,
doing yoga, then they're leaving at about 12. Now, in my
yeah,
head, I know that's not responsible. They're leaving at lunchtime. I know
yeah.
how far people travel for my retreats. They're
Hmm.
not going to go on a pub on the way home because they've got to get
Yeah,
home to the kid or whatever's going on. And
yeah,
you packaged me up a little treat for the car. And
Yeah.
that's such a nice surprise. It's telling your guests the whole way, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of you. The last thing I want you leaving a retreat is leaving it hungry. And me going,
Yeah.
yeah, but we finished at 12. Your lunchtime's not my problem.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a very nice note to end on or like a good dismissal. Whereas if they know that they've got like a beautiful flapjack to eat in the car or something, it's going to be great.
Okay. Then dietary requirements.
Hmm.
Obviously, we've spoken a little bit about how simply working with a vegan caterer can make that a lot easier. Um,
Yeah.
I work with you here, but definitely in some of my other countries, it's an absolute mix. Like in Spain, people can have fish, they can have different meats, they can have vegetarian, they can have vegan. So then already you're putting a lot of dietary requirements on your caterer just to know someone's vegetarian, someone's vegan, um, someone's pescatarian, and someone's gluten free. So in and
Yeah.
amongst that, like really overarching dietary requirements, that's quite a lot. So I try to really help my caterers. And from my booking emails, from my confirmation emails, when any I'm talking about dietary requirements, I say
Hmm.
vegetarian, vegan, gluten free, and medical dietary requirements only.
Yeah.
And I'm quite strict about that because then otherwise you get, well, I don't like tomatoes. Well, I don't like onions. Well, I don't like coriander. Well, I don't like.
Yeah.
How do you manage that? Because then equally, we don't want people sitting down to a whole meal they don't like anything that's in. What's your advice?
No, I mean, it is a little tricky, to negotiate those points in general. I think the way that you go about it is not dissimilar to how I would ask for that from most people as well. Is, what is the essential part of it? What is is this is serious medical allergy or intolerance? Because obviously that needs to be treated with the paramount of respect and care, but also knowing, for example, that like we've talked about earlier, there's no cross-contamination risks with a lot of allergens within my kitchen because firstly, I'm preparing everything from scratch, maybe except the breads, which I buy in from a respectable bakery. But I know that I know everything that I put into the dish. It's not a case of like, oh, hang on, let me check this
Mm,
label of this thing that I bought. Oh, there's something I didn't realize that was in there. I made everything, so I know exactly what went into it. Sometimes it's a little bit of a thinker, and I've got to kind of go through it in my mind or refer to a recipe on my phone. But because we've made everything from scratch, we know what's in it, and then it also provides us a really easy option when somebody says, actually, no, there is somebody here with an anaphylactic reaction to stone fruit or something. I can go, okay,
yeah,
normally the tagine would have that in, but we'll substitute this out. Whereas if you're buying things in, you don't have that as an option. So
yeah,
working with somebody, myself or otherwise, who makes everything from scratch, just gives you that option of flexibility when you do have something serious and important to contend with, not just a dislike of something.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it is also important that you don't go, okay, so we've checked all the dietary requirements and we're serving, I don't know, sweet potato, chickpea, and black bean tagine. That's a big firm favorite. Flatbreads and quinoa tabbouleh on the side, that sort of thing. And then you find out that like somebody just hates, I don't know, chickpeas or sweet potato, and so everything's all mixed in at that point, and it's presented to them on a plate, and we get almost exactly that plate back. And that's a really
yeah,
sinking feeling as a caterer because I feel like I ticked all the boxes and I had hoped that it would be suitable for everybody. But I would say that that probably only happens maybe 1 in 100 meals that have been served. And actually, it's impossible to know ahead of time without then opening the floodgates for, oh, I'm just a bit fussy about this and I don't like mushrooms
yeah.
unless they're cooked this way and so forth. That like you can't get that granular and sort of build the meal in addition to the dietary requirements around one or two people's specific
Mm,
preferences, but maybe having a meal that's comprised of, say, four major elements, or,
yeah.
like the side salad is hearty enough that if somebody really just hates the curry or whatever it might be, that they have at least a good amount of food to eat. And I often try to bring a little spare of everything just in case if somebody says, I didn't care
Mm.
for this, but if there's any more of the dip and the bread and the salad, I could really go for that. And I go, here you go, there's loads more.
That's
So,
a really amazing tip, actually, because it makes you think um, of what are my menu options. Are there
yeah,
enough different components to it?
yeah,
And yeah, thinking of your dishes, there are often, they feel more components than I would do at home. Like it feels luxurious that you do a mash with a tabbouleh as well. Whereas at home, I
yeah.
wouldn't do that. But it's two
You do
different
one or the other.
components
Mhm.
And that's just really clever and really clever. So, and it took me a very long time to tell you I can't eat chickpeas because it's
Yeah,
not a medical intolerance. It just
no,
really bloats me and makes me uncomfortable. But it took me
yeah,
so long to tell you. Then you're like, I'll just change it for lentil.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. And for a lot of things, it's a really easy swap. And again, because we're saying we're building everything from scratch, it's relatively easy to do. But I often have a conversation with people when we're catering weddings and other large events, and they'll say something to me like, "Okay, we've got 60 guests coming. Everyone's pretty happy with vegan and vegetarian food, so they won't mind the fact that everything's going to be vegan. But there's like, one person who's got a nut allergy, so we need the entire wedding menu throughout this
Yes.
like 10-hour day to be nut free." And that is an option, especially if it's a very serious allergy. But you can also consider that that's one person out of 60. And what you might
Yeah.
need is to have a separate set of food that hasn't come anywhere near the nuts, segregated for them. And then you can have, because if you try to
Yeah.
take a lot of things away, and not that you're reducing and eliminating things, there's 35,000 edible plant species to eat. But when you're already eliminating some food options when you're going for vegan cuisine, you don't want to eliminate that further and say, actually, because there's one celiac at the wedding, the entire wedding needs to be gluten free and so
Yeah.
forth. So you need to consider, again, if you had a retreat with 12 guests and you had 6 celiacs, obviously it's a gluten-free menu because that
Yes.
goes without question. And it's a sliding scale of how much attention and care does this need compared to it being an allergy or an intolerance or a preference or whatever. And you're not allergic to chickpeas, but it does cause you trouble. You're not going to
Mm.
want to eat them. And that's a relatively easy switch for us to make. Whereas if, for
Mm.
example, you said the same for onions or
Yes.
garlic or something, it's going to be very challenging for us to provide you with any warm, comforting food without some of those staples that go into the base of that. So it would be easier to say, Laura, would you mind bringing something separate? And all of your guests would eat this because currently you're,
Mm.
you're experiencing a
Mm.
difficulty with that. And again, it's all about communication. I think that's going to be the end of
Mm.
this conversation, is going to result in us realizing that the more you talk about it and express it clearly what your expectations are, and what your needs are, then you can work together as a team with your caterer to figure out how to serve you and your guests in the most effective way.
And then getting that information as early as possible.
Yeah,
When I'm taking um, residential retreat bookings, so weekend retreats, um, week retreats, when people are eating a lot more food, I get
yeah,
diet requirements on a booking form at time of booking. But then
yeah,
still, when I send the final details out 6 weeks before, I still will reconfirm I have your dietary requirement as X. And it's
yeah,
amazing how many people have come back and it's changed in that
yeah,
time. So like ask as early as you can and then clarify, and always medical dietary requirements only. And then
yeah,
still people can give you above and beyond information on that. Um, and I do have a couple of retreats abroad where it's because of where I'm traveling, it's very, very hard to safely meet certain dietary requirements. Like when we take
sure.
groups to India, I cannot feel certain that something's not been cooked in groundnut oil. So I
Yeah,
I do just have to tie the line with, if you have a severe nut allergy, I'm really sorry, we cannot take you on this retreat,
yeah,
because
it's so
I cannot
commonly used out there. Mm.
safety. Or as you just said, it is okay if it was a day retreat to say to someone, I don't feel that we can safely accommodate your requirements. Let me
Hmm.
take £20 off the fee and please bring
Yeah,
your own
yeah,
lunch. That it is
absolutely.
okay to do those things, because at the end of the day, you're looking after someone.
And
Um,
as awkward as that conversation potentially is, that says, "Do you mind bringing your own lunch in exchange for this small refund?" That's still a far better experience than them showing up and not having anything to eat.
yeah. And I think if
If
you
that
don't have
communication
an
doesn't happen.
allergy, you don't understand how much peace of mind matters
Yeah,
more. We had
yeah,
my nephew over on the weekend. He's only 8, and he has serious medical allergies, EpiPen allergies, to so much, the poor lad. And
wow,
I show my love through cooking, and to buy him a cake versus cooking a cake broke my little heart, but I knew the peace of mind to his mother,
yeah,
to see it in the packaging, to read the packaging, to see it wasn't open, was way more
yeah, yeah,
important than, oh, it's a homemade cake. It was more
exactly.
love to, it's a cake in a packet,
Yeah.
than
In
anything else.
exactly the same way, often when I'm providing a gluten-free option, the most recent thing I did for you at Random's house, we had 2 gluten-free guests, and I did a curry for you, and I had naans on everybody's plates, but then on a separate table, on the other side of the room, I had the gluten-free option, which was the exact same curry, the exact same rice, chutneys, everything else. And then instead of the onion bhajis, which I would make with a little bit of wheat flour, they had falafels, which were made with gram flour, and then they had gluten-free flatbreads. And I left the gluten-free flatbread sealed in the packet, and that's not actually very presentable, and it doesn't look nice because you've got like a packet of gluten-free store-bought pittas sitting on the table. But actually, like you said, that peace of mind of saying, "Oh, I can still see it's sealed. It hasn't been in the air with all of the other flour that's kicking around the kitchen, and I can open this myself and take this from it." Was actually something that they really enjoyed. It also prevents anybody from accidentally taking the wrong option and snaffling up the
Yes.
gluten-free option
Yeah.
without it being for the person that it's supposed to be for. So,
Which is another, again, bring it up, another challenge of catering. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
is wrangling people. Yeah.
Yes, it's people eating things that weren't for them. Just two more questions I think I've got for you. One on
Sure.
like menu and designing menu, and also the approach of food, like making sure that the approach that you have for your day is matching the approach you want from the food. Like, do you want a big plate of hearty food? Do you want a really elegant plate of food? And how much input or not do
Mm.
you like from your retreat leaders on the ins and outs of menus? Because I give my chefs quite a lot of free reign, especially when we're abroad, but always because I'm working with a chef I trust. If I need to micromanage your menu, probably wasn't the right chef for me to be working with. So, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts around input on menus?
Well, the more input, the better.
Mm.
Especially if we can work together and look at an itinerary is a really good way to go about it. Like I've said before about some other points, because I can see how your day flows and what activities you might have. You know, filling people with a massive lasagna at lunch ahead of your walk in
Yes.
the forest is not going to be the right call. Filling somebody with a massive lasagna ahead of bed or bed in an hour or two after that, perfect. You know, and similarly, lighter options maybe in the morning when people may be eating less or smaller portions or they're not quite ready for a big meal yet. You know, just committing to the idea that at 10 a.m. everybody wants a full English is not going to be suitable
Mm.
for everybody. So working together, looking at your itinerary, but also zooming out even further than just the granularity of an individual day and what you're doing at each hour, but to have an idea of what the vibe of the whole retreat is. Is it a relax, get off the grid meditation, silent retreats I've done, you know, things where it's really about spirituality more than anything else and about, you know, resetting or like a cleanse or anything like that. That's going to be much smaller portions. That's going to be lighter food. That's going to be more raw fruits and veggies, you know.
You're sharing bowls. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe also leaning more into a table sharing or self-serve so people can choose exactly how much they want without sort of being just served something on a plate at the end of the day and being expected to eat this whole plate of, you know, as delicious as it might be, a big risotto with sides and breads and everything else like that. So feeling out what the purpose of the retreat is and you talking about that is very useful. And I've learned myself from that we serve very different things with the retreat experiences that I was just describing to things like we've done things where it's been like a Pilates boot camp retreat or like a fitness regime thing, or it's been as part of like a running camp where they're doing marathon training at the same time. There's completely different needs and they can be met if you have that conversation that says like, no, actually this retreat, even though it's a residential yoga location, isn't actually about doing all of this flexibility and strength work and relaxing and doing, you know, tarot readings and everything else that might be normal on a yoga retreat. And it's actually we're in the yard doing battle ropes and there's a punch bag slung up and everything else, you know. And I've done those retreats at the same locations, but they've had completely different purposes. And you can say, okay, so you guys need really filling high protein meals that tick all of these other boxes. And you know, the people that are doing like the silent meditation retreat probably just want to have lots of options on hand for when they do feel like they want to get around to eating. And so again, you know, we keep coming back to it, it's all about communicating that in the first place and talking it through. But yeah, definitely having a look at what your purpose of the retreat is and also what the itinerary is would grant a lot of insight into what kind of food you need and
Mm.
why and when as well.
Mm. No, exactly. And when it's abroad, any food cultural things that come into that.
Yeah.
I run a retreat in Lithuania,
Hmm.
and I didn't realize until I got there that they they still eat the very traditional way of an incredibly hearty meal at lunchtime and then
Right.
really light at dinner. So for the first couple of days on the retreat, we none of us are used to eating big lunches. So we
Right.
wouldn't really finish all the lunch and there'd be leftovers. And then at
Yeah, and you'd be
nighttime it'd be a
stuffed.
small soup. And we're like, oh, I'm a bit hungry.
Now I'm
Um,
really hungry. Yeah. At
yeah,
lunchtime I was stuffed and now I'm
and
really
now I'm
hungry. That's not
hungry.
really yeah.
Yeah. And now I know
Yeah.
I can either tweak my day or I'm considering actually just saying like, yeah, come on, we'd like
Yeah,
let's flip
let's
those meals
embrace the
around.
culture and see if we
Yeah.
can tag along.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um
Something on that
yeah.
note as well that I often try to consider when we have people where they have the arrivals at a especially at a residential retreat on the Friday when you tend to find that you've got 10, 15 people from all over the country that maybe follow all the same online classes together, but they've never met in real life. They don't actually know each other. Maybe one or two people are coming along together, splitting a room, but they don't all know each other. Is an amazing opportunity to have like a table sharing meal where there's a lot of pass and play. Can you hand me that? Can you give me the breads? Can you pass me the salad? Whatever, because it gets people talking. It's almost acting like an icebreaker where you can have like a Middle Eastern meze, and everybody's passing and saying, "Ah, this goes well with that. Have you tried this? This dip's amazing." Like it's just a way to connect. You're all eating the same food, and you're sharing that experience with one another. That you can have little conversations that say, like, "By the way, I'm Jane, and where are you from?" and so forth, and just acting as an icebreaker with that first meal, and then maybe the subsequent meals are a bit more like everybody's got a proper plated meal with a few sides in the middle of the table or something. But that icebreaker table meze option is a really good way to sort of get people to, um, you know, get connected and not feel like you're all sitting around with strangers at a big table and you don't really know who anybody is. And maybe you're outside of your comfort zone and that's not allowing you to relax. So anything that we can do to encourage people to relax more at a retreat, which is obviously more often than not the goal of the retreat, to have that experience where people were getting to know each other a little bit over that
Mm.
first meal, or even the snacks that are on arrival in the same way.
Yeah, that's such a good tip. I really never thought of that. I can see that. And especially if you've got like a couple of people stuck talking to each other, it brings more people into conversation. That is a pro tip. I think my last question
Hmm.
is around deposits
Hmm.
and payments because I myself am all non-refundable deposits on stuff. And I know, a lot of people will book their caterer and they'll book their venue. They're going to do their weekend retreat, but then maybe something happens and they're struggling to
Yeah.
fill it. And I think
Yeah.
people can be very surprised then about losing deposits with caterers. Now, I think personally that it's only fair because you have turned down other work that you could have been taking on that date. But is there some sort of way that deposit, or maybe they committed to the caterer that it was going to be 15 people and now, oh, it's 10 people and he's charged per head. How do I have that conversation? What are
Mhm.
ways people can respect their caterer and respect you're running a business and but also maybe minimize their risk to some degree? Is there anything that you see? We've never had this conversation because I've been running retreats for a long time, but how, if you were nervous, how could you respect your caterer is running their own business and minimize your risk to some degree?
Yeah, you're in a privileged position of being almost fully booked almost all of the
Mm,
time, which makes things a little bit more straightforward to you. And often you have things like wait lists for filling in those
mm,
spots when people are suddenly unwell or they can't attend for some other reason. So
yeah.
it's going to be quite different for somebody who's doing their first residential or something that's new to them. I think again, it's been the underlying theme of this whole podcast is that like it's really about communicating that and having that back and forth and developing that trust with whoever you're working with, to allow for that exactly those things to be said out loud and to say, look, I've got 8 people booked on. It's 3 months away. I'm hoping to have 15 people. Will that be enough to meet your minimum requirement? That's a good question to ask. Another good way of looking at it is saying like, I've got 8 people booked on, so I've got some amount of money to put down as a deposit. And, is that deposit refundable if for any reason it has to cancel, having that conversation. And I suppose something that I learned mainly through needing to be really flexible when I started in 2020 and
Yeah.
2021, when there were lots of different reasons where people would be suddenly unavailable at short notice. And we learned very quickly that like flexibility helps build trust and it helps, just provide a sort of more comfortable and safer environment for two people to work together, but up to a point. Because as you're right, if you say to somebody, look, I've got this retreat 27th, 28th, 29th of March this year, and it's definitely going ahead, and I'd love you to be the caterer. So please, can you book yourself out and don't accept any
Mm,
other work, which is standard for me that I wouldn't jump between
mm,
jobs over the same weekend more often than not, unless it's just a delivery or something or a birthday cake. But like we would have it where we would then go, okay, 2 days before and a day after for my own sanity, like I'm
yeah.
not doing anything else. So we're essentially blocking out a week, a
A
working week of
week.
five
Yeah.
days, given that it's Thursday to Monday, where we're not going to accept any other work because we know we're going to get the work from that one specific event. And then if they say, actually, I'm postponing it till September all of a sudden, and they let you know with, say, 2 weeks notice or something, there's no way
Mm,
I'm getting anybody in that window. And okay, I get a weekend with the kids, but I'm missing out on what was potentially 25% of my monthly revenue or something,
yeah.
So it's really important to manage those expectations with whoever you're booking to say, I know it's your high season versus low season is another conversation to have. People often say to me, like, do I need to pay a deposit, for this? And sometimes the answer is yes, it's June, July, August, September. If I'm
Mm,
blocking out a weekend, then I am going to need a deposit because I need some degree of guarantee or at least an amount of money that if it ends up all being cancelled, at least I've still got a little bit that helps me, just
yeah.
struggle on for another week. But it's also, I get people asking, I've got this retreat. It's going to be 15 people. It's in late November. And I go, yeah, don't worry about a deposit. We can just pay things 2 weeks in advance. And that's how we'll run it. So once you get a good
Mm,
number of people booked in, you know how many people you got. And we can make changes right up until then. It's a lot less stressful for everybody at that time of year, but particularly for me because of, wedding season and everything else that comes with it. So again, it's one of these variable answers, but it's a conversation that takes place that you say, do you need to put a deposit down? Is the deposit refundable? And how late into the process can I make changes? And for me, that's where I can offer a lot of flexibility that is less financial and more just helpful, is I can say, yeah, right up until 2 weeks ahead, I can be flexible on how many people it is, especially if it's just a change of one or two people, and that will especially easy to do if you've priced everything per head rather than a fixed price for the entire event. And similarly, if they need to then cancel a few places and reduce that down. But again, knowing that if they say, look, we had 10 people, but now it's just three, is it still okay to go ahead? We're saying it out loud. We can probably feel that, no, that isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
And you should probably postpone the entire event because a
Yeah.
retreat for three people isn't worth it. But as almost a ridiculous example to give, that's one where it's come down to too few people for it to be practical to even make the food at the right price
Yeah.
point, that I can't provide you with that service without just breaking even and using up the weekend. Whereas,
Yeah.
for example, if you say, hey, we were going to have 20 people, but now it's just 18, it doesn't really make much difference. And that's
Yeah.
very easy to accommodate. I can either say, well, that can either look like there's even more food for everybody,
Yes.
or we can reduce the portion sizes and reduce the headcount, sorry, and, refund you what you might have paid. And
Mm,
knowing when you're paying is obviously very useful as well, whether it's a deposit or not, but also like when does the final balance need to be settled by? And I've learned
yes.
myself, both ways that like, sometimes it can be just the busy nature of life, very difficult to acquire the payments after the event has taken place. So I always
Yeah.
like to have everything done beforehand. Not least of all because you often have to do the ingredient shopping, but we used to do it where we would have like maybe a 20% deposit and then like 40% paid a couple of months beforehand, and then another 40% paid just after the event.
Hmm.
Very occasionally, that would allow people to either forget for weeks or months to pay, or it would be that like there was maybe some niggle around like service or issues, or maybe they did have cancellations, and then they would make the decision for themselves saying that we had 5 people cancelled, so actually we don't think we need to pay quite as much.
Mm,
And because you were having that after the fact, you didn't really have a leg to stand on because you could sort of
mm,
say, well, I'll be unable to buy the ingredients or I'll be unable to deliver this service if you haven't
mm.
paid ahead. So I like to run it quite close, at least within my business, where we say, you can make changes right up until 2 weeks out, sometimes 1 week out if it's somebody that I know and trust really well, and the repeat events rather than like a one-off thing where I might be ordering exotic ingredients in 2 weeks ahead of time.
Yeah.
But to be able to say we can offer that flexibility right up until this point in time, and right up until then is the time when you pay. And once you've paid and agreed the menu and given me all the dietary information, that's kind of
We're
where I
locked
leave it.
in. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think as you said, like the takeaway again and again and again is communication. but it
Yeah.
makes me realize we can communicate more than we might think is okay. And often
Yeah.
I know when I go and get an expert to come and do something, whatever it is, I can sometimes put too much of the ball in that court rather than
Mm.
knowing, no, it's okay for me to ask questions. It's okay for me to
Yeah.
clarify. It's okay for me to say, look, I'm really sorry, I don't understand this, but could you just explain? And to
Yeah.
have no shame or embarrassment around saying things
Sure.
like, this is my first go. This is what I'm thinking. The more you are open with that caterer, the more they can adapt with you. And there's no embarrassment to saying, I'm a
Yeah.
newbie. I don't know how this is going to go, but I'm
Yeah.
excited.
But this is perfect word to use is embarrassment, or like you said, shame to a lesser extent. But that embarrassment in that phone call or WhatsApp message or an email now that says, "I'm really sorry, I don't quite know what that means," or "Can you clarify this?" or I need to just be clear that you're also bringing a fruit bowl and some granola and yogurt to live in the fridge while we're at the residential or whatever. Like that micro embarrassment now is really small in comparison to like the almost horror level of embarrassment when you
Yes.
go, I'm sorry guys, there's nothing to eat until lunch. I didn't think this through in like a retreat space, or like I'm gonna have to nip out between classes just to go and fetch some food from Tesco's for everybody or something like that. That's
Yeah.
a horrible position to be in. So
Yeah.
like it's like do the small inconvenient thing now to avoid a massive inconvenient thing in the future. So I think that's certainly a way to look at it. It's like,
Yeah.
could this potentially be really embarrassing later down the line if I don't tick these T's and whatever it is,
Mm.
dot the I's, cross the T's now, and
No,
have that
that is
conversation back and
so
forth.
helpful. So thank you for breaking all of those bits down. And yeah, it makes such a difference to the experience your guests have, how they feel about the retreat afterwards, and how you feel hosting the retreat. And I love working with you. We've got a lot in the diary.
We do, which is great, and I think between you and I, we've reached that point now where the trust is there that you can just say should be 25 or 26 people next week, and
Yeah,
here's the payment, and bring something lovely that ticks all the boxes, and then we just show up with it. So
yeah,
often you'll have more of an in-depth conversation with somebody the first or second time that you're
yeah,
booking them, and then as time goes on, you're just I've got people that I've been working for 4 or 5 years who just say like, is 10 people in a month, is that good? And I
yeah.
go, yeah, that date's
And that's
free,
why
yeah, no problem.
everything's always so much the first time you do it. And then
Hmm.
the more you want to have suppliers that you work with again and again and again, because it
Yeah,
just gets easier and easier and easier.
and they
So,
want that too.
well, of course, don't they?
Yeah.
You don't want to have to keep answering the questions. I know your diary is very full, but I know obviously you can think about expanding, adding another chef in as well. Do you have space for more people to wish to book you?
Yeah, within reason. We're pretty busy in certain parts of the year. Certainly throughout May, where I'm also taking a short holiday to Europe, but also June and most of August, which is often the case because it's we're not just a retreat caterer. We also do things like weddings and anniversaries and parties and things like that. But yeah, I mean, essentially, it just becomes down to a calendar question more often than not. I'm very
Mm.
happy to travel. I'm very happy to stay on site and be there cooking all weekend, or go back and forth if it's something more local to Hampshire, especially in the north of Hampshire or south of Wiltshire, because I'm based in Romsey. But yeah, I can't be in two places at the same time. But other than that, I'm very happy to find something that works for everybody. So yeah, there's still a good chunk of our calendar is open, but just maybe not in like May and June.
Yeah. And if someone wanted to find you, it's just the Hampshire Vegan, right?
Yeah, Hampshire Vegan Catering. So hampshirevegancatering.co.uk, or just email us, which is hampshirevegancatering@gmail.com.
Yeah. And you're great on Instagram. I love your
Yeah,
Instagram. And
yeah, we're
I
there.
noticed you're really supportive of your retreat leaders if they've got a space or something. I notice you
Mm,
share their stuff. And because obviously you're in
absolutely.
local, you're in Hampshire, you do, the park runs, you have a community as
Yeah,
well, and you
yeah.
kindly share and support, I see.
Yeah, it's a reciprocal relationship. If you're struggling to fill slots 10, 11, and 12 on your retreat and you don't quite know how to pull that off and you're a bit stressed about it, well, like it works in my favor as well if we get a fully booked event, or, we get beyond the 12 minimum that you were looking for and you get up to 15 or something. So I'm always very happy. I used to work in digital marketing and social media before I was a chef, so I have
Didn't know
experience
that.
there. No, well, you learn something new every day, I guess. But Yeah, so I'm always very happy to do that. It benefits me as well. If you book me for your catering and we get a fully booked event, it's much better than if it's only half full, for both the instructor and those who are putting on the as a host, but also as the caterer. So yeah, I'm very happy to help share and fill. And sometimes I just have to remember which one comes first because I don't want to push people towards someone else's thing before there's somebody's that's happening
Yes,
in like
yeah.
a week or something. But yeah, very happy to sort of help in any regard in that way. Yeah.
All right, my loves. Well, I hope that really helps. I hope that answers lots of your questions from, yeah, you really should have a caterer. We shouldn't really be doing things ourselves from our own kitchen.
Yeah.
And above and beyond that, they elevate your experience and they have people coming back time and time again. And I have people that come to my retreats just for the food, especially Spain.
Yeah.
Like I'm not here for the yoga.
I have heard that now from multiple yoga instructors, which is very flattering for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've had people where we do regular things in Twyford and they say like, I used to come just for the yoga, but actually now I think I come for like a good meal, with a bit of yoga on the side, like, which is really funny to me.
Well, I would do anything for your flapjacks.
Ah,
Your ginger
that's true.
flapjacks. I'd do anything for those. So I hope this was helpful and do reach out to John. If you have a catering need, just reach out to him. He will talk it through with you on no obligation as well. If you say like, no,
Yeah.
actually, no, it's not right. It's not right for us, or it is, or you might do this, we might recommend
Hmm.
someone. So
Yeah.
please feel free to reach out to John. And I hope that was helpful, my loves. I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.